All right, so here we have green and gold. It's called green and gold because you have this great contrast between this really bright yellow flower and the green leaves. And it spreads and forms mats on the ground and in moist, shady areas throughout South Carolina. And it blooms from March till June. All right, next we have Marsh Marigold, which is not a great name for it because it is not a marigold. It's actually one of the buttercups. And this grows in moist areas, really prefers very wet areas, and it spreads also by a rhizome, which is an underground stem. They'll do pretty well in full sun. Now, the marsh marigold can be mixed up with the fig buttercup, which is invasive, but marsh marigold has leaves that are more heart-shaped. Here we have the yellow violet, sometimes called the heartleaf or spearleaf violet by the shape of the leaves because it's kind of spear-shaped. You find this in rich, moist areas, and it's got that nice yellow flower. Now here we have trout lily, one of our very early bloomers. And by late spring, they're going to be dormant. And they have these single flowers that are usually kind of yellowish, almost remind me of a shooting star, the way they're shaped, and they're solitary. And the trout lily will spread and form nice matted area, not good ground cover. They're called trout lilies because somebody thought that the leaves, which are mottled looking, reminded them of a trout underneath the water in a stream. All right, next we have the dwarf crested iris. This is one of our smaller irises. It's pretty short, usually 6 inches is about as tall as it's going to get. Makes a nice ground cover, and it blooms early in the spring. And it has a nice little crest on it, and you can see that. It's kind of a frilly looking crest. All right, next we have little brown jugs, sometimes called wild ginger. And it's a really unique plant. It's always low growing. It can kind of spread. And it has leaves that are kind of heart-shaped, and they're green with some of these white splotches. But what's really cool about it is the flower, because the flower is kind of urn-shaped, and that's why it's called little brown jugs, because it looks like a jug. And it's pollinated by ants and other ground-crawling insects, which is pretty cool. And in the past, the root has been used for flavoring by Native Americans, thus the name wild ginger. And this is the jack in the pulpit. And it has green trifoliate leaves, but most people don't pay attention to the leaves because they're focused on this really unique flower that has these kind of white and purple stripes, and it has modified leaves, and it looks like you have a person standing in a pulpit. And the jack, which is in the pulpit there, that's a spadix, which is a modified leaf, and at the base of it is going to be the flowers. All right, so here we have our violet wood sorrel. And this is a low-growing plant. Some people think this is clover because it has trifoliate leaves, but it's not. If you flip the leaves over, they're purplish on the back, and the flower is kind of a purplish violet color. The leaves are kind of unique in that they fold up when the sun goes down. And now we have spring beauty, Claytonia Virginiana, which is a really small, kind of inconspicuous plant. And the leaves are actually kind of grass-like. But they're one of our first bloomers in the spring, and they bloom from March to May. One thing that's unique about the spring beauty is that at night and on cloudy days, the flowers will close. Okay, next we have the red columbine. Really unique flower because it actually points downwards. So the stamens and the pistils, the reproductive parts, they point downwards. And the scientific name, it actually refers to an eagle's claw. If you look at the shape of it, if you use your imagination, it kind of reminds you of those talons that are coming down on their prey. And this flower attracts hummingbirds and bees and butterflies. And you always find it in moisture areas in the spring. Here we have the red buckeye. This is really unique because it has palmate leaves. Each leaf has 5 leaflets, which makes it look kind of like a hand with fingers there. Has these nice red tubular flowers that you see early in the spring, which are going to attract hummingbirds and other bees. And but the shoots and the fruit produces these nice little nut-like structures that people put in their pockets, and they call it a buckeye, and it's for for good luck, but ironically, it is poisonous. Next, we have the Adam and Eve orchid, also called the putty root. This is pretty unique. It's a flower that only blooms in May after its leaves have died. All right, so here we have the Pinkster Azalea. This is one of our native azaleas, but unlike the azaleas you often plant in your yard, they are deciduous, so they're going to lose their leaves, and they put their leaves back on in the spring. Has these nice kind of white to pink flowers that attract hummingbirds and swallowtail butterflies, but all parts of the plant are poisonous. And azaleas are actually rhododendrons, and rhododendron means rose tree in Latin. Here we have Oconee Bells with these nice rounded green leaves, which turn kind of brown in the winter, but then they're present all winter. They're a very rare tri-state flower in that it's only found where Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina come together near streams. The leaves are evergreen, has a flower with nice pointed petals, and this was discovered in 1788, but then nobody could find it again for 100 years. Okay, now here we have hepatica, or round leaf liver leaf. And if you look at the leaf and use your imagination, it somewhat reminds you of a liver. That's why it's called liver leaf. And it was used by early settlers as a tonic for the liver. It was a very common thing in the past that if a plant looked like an organ, then you could use that plant to treat illnesses of that organ. This blooms early in the spring, right before the leaves come out on the trees, has these nice kind of pinkish flowers, has evergreen leaves that are found there all winter, and it attracts sweat bees and flies as pollinators. Here we have our native honeysuckle. This the coral honeysuckle, has these beautiful, brilliant scarlet red flowers that you see in the springtime. And right below the flower, the two leaves that are typically separate kind of merge. And this is a favorite of the hummingbirds because it blooms early in the spring, and it's red, and it's going to attract the hummingbirds. Here we have the South Carolina state flower, the yellow jessamine. You know, this is the early spring bloomer and has this vine that is evergreen. It's nice and beautiful all winter. Flowers smell really great. It's kind of like a cherry Kool-Aid smell almost. Now this is a beautiful flower, but it is poisonous. All parts of the flower are poisonous, so it's important not to consume it. Some people can confuse this with a honeysuckle, but you cannot consume the nectar of yellow jessamine.